My name is Marin Alder. I'm 38 years old, and on October 18th, in Ballroom C of the Harborview Grand Hotel, my parents erased me from the company I had helped save. They did it in front of 300 investors, employees, vendors, bankers, and the kind of local business people who still remembered when I was 7 years old. Handing out name tags beside my grandfather, my father stood under the blue Alder Industrial Components banner, smiled at me like I was an interruption, and said, "You're here tonight as a guest. Marin, not an heir." My brother Tate stood near the podium with his succession speech in a black leather folder, already smiling before anyone had voted on anything. The company my grandfather built, the company whose payroll I had once protected with a $600,000 loan, was at stake, along with my name, my work, and what little dignity my family had not already tried to take. Somewhere in the room, a woman most people had ignored had already checked the numbers twice. I had one folder on my lap, 3 envelopes in my bag, and a document my parents had signed back when they were too desperate to read carefully. Later that night, when the corporate secretary opened the official tally, my father's face changed so completely that for 1 second he looked like a man who had seen the floor disappear under his own shoes. The reason his face went white did not begin on that stage. It began years earlier, in the old plant break room, with a chipped green mug, a ringing office phone, and a daughter who had mistaken usefulness for belonging. I did not cry when he said it. That surprised people, I think. There are certain rooms where everyone knows what a woman is supposed to do after being humiliated. She is supposed to flush red. She is supposed to blink fast. She is supposed to argue, or leave, or make the kind of scene that lets the person hurting her say, "See? This is why we can't trust her." I did none of that. I stood near the side aisle, beside a tall arrangement of white flowers that smelled too sweet, and looked at the program in my hand. My name had been removed from the history page, not misspelled, not moved. Removed. The program listed my grandfather, Harold Alder, as founder. It listed my father, Raymond Alder, as the steady hand who had guided the company through challenging times. It listed my mother, Celia, as community liaison and board member. It listed Tate as vice president of growth, which was a generous title for a man who had once lost a supplier contract because he forgot to return 3 phone calls. Under the next generation, there was a glossy photograph of Tate leaning against a machine press he did not know how to operate. I turned the page once, then again. Nothing. No mention of the year the line of credit froze. No mention of the emergency payroll. No mention of the night the bank declined the wire. And 37 hourly employees were 2 days from missing their checks. No mention of the woman who had sat in the office until 1:17 in the morning with the payroll manager, waiting for confirmation. My mother saw me looking. She was wearing a cream silk jacket with pearl buttons, her hair sprayed into the same smooth shape used for church fundraisers and board dinners. She gave me the smallest smile. Not an apology, a warning. Across the room, Tate lifted his glass slightly, like he was toasting me from the family table, where there was no chair with my name on it. That detail stayed with me, not because it hurt the most. It didn't. By then, I had collected worse. It stayed with me because I knew then that this was not a mistake. Mistakes are uneven. This had been arranged. When my father called me a guest, several people looked down at their laps. One man from the bank adjusted his glasses. My Aunt Lenore stared at the stage with her mouth pressed tight. Rosa Kim from payroll, sitting 3 rows behind the employees, looked at me once and then at the corporate secretary. Gwen Sato had not moved. She sat at the long table near the stage, with her gray hair pinned low, her pen straight across the top of the voting report. To most people in the room, she was just the quiet woman who kept the minutes, announced motions, and made sure the microphones worked. My father made that mistake too. He thought loud men owned the room. I knew better. Welcome back to the Madeline Files, where the quiet parts of family stories finally get said out loud. If you have ever been treated like the emergency contact, the backup plan, the responsible one, or the person everyone calls when there is a mess but forgets when there is a celebration, this story is for you. Tell me where you are listening from, and if any part of this feels familiar, stay with me. Because sometimes the truth does not need to be louder. It only needs to be official. I grew up inside Alder Industrial Components, which sounds colder than it was when my grandfather ran it. Back then, it smelled like machine oil, burnt coffee, cardboard boxes, and the peppermint candies he kept in a jar on his desk. The plant sat on the east side of Branford, Ohio, just off Route 6, in a low brick building with aluminum siding and 3 loading bays painted dark green. We made fittings and spots for agricultural equipment small enough to ship in crates, but important enough that farmers called angry when deliveries were late. My grandfather knew every employee's name, not in the fake way people claim when they run for something. He knew who had a daughter at Kent State, who needed Tuesdays off for dialysis, who packed tuna sandwiches, and who liked the coffee so strong it left a ring in the mug. The mug matters. It was chipped on the rim, green with white letters that said, Alder Industrial, since 1979. There were dozens of them in the break room, lined up on a metal shelf beside powdered creamer and sugar packets that had hardened from humidity. I used to drink hot chocolate out of one when I was little, and my grandfather let me sit at the reception desk during school breaks. "You're my sharp one," she would say, handing me a stack of visitor badges. "You see everything." At first, I thought that was love. Maybe it was, from him. But in my family, compliments often came with assignments attached. By the time I was 12, I knew how to answer the office phone with a professional voice. By 14, I knew which vendors could wait another week and which ones would stop shipments if my father avoided them. By 16, I had learned that my mother's phrase, "Marin can handle it," meant an adult had decided not to. Tate was 6 years younger than me. He was blonde like my mother, easy smiling like my father, and born with a talent for being forgiven before he apologized. When Tate spilled grape soda on a stack of invoices, my mother laughed and said, "Boys don't notice paper." When I once misfiled a customer receipt, my father made me stay late and redo the whole drawer because details matter if you want people to trust you. Tate was allowed to be charming. I was expected to be correct. The first time I remember understanding the difference, I was 15. My grandfather had just come home from the hospital after his first heart episode, and the company was behind on a parts order for a regional distributor. My father had taken Tate to a baseball game because Tate had been worried about Grandpa and needed a normal afternoon. My mother was at a charity luncheon. I was in the office doing homework at the spare desk when the distributor called. The shipment was wrong, 200 pieces short. I called the floor supervisor, found the packing list, checked the inventory binder, and discovered the parts suit had been pulled but not loaded. I asked Mr. Haskell from shipping if he could call the driver before he reached Dayton. He did. The driver turned around at exit 52. When my father got back, he said, "Good catch." Then he handed Tate a foam finger and said, "Tell your sister how close we were to catching that foul ball. That was how it worked." My work disappeared into normal. Tate's stories became family memory. Being needed is not the same as being chosen. I did not have those words then. Back then, I only had the feeling, like I was standing in the kitchen after dinner, holding everyone else's plates, while laughter happened in the next room. My mother was not cruel in obvious ways when I was young. That made her harder to understand. She did not scream. She did not slap. She did not call me names. She just made tiny adjustments to the room until I was useful and invisible. If I came downstairs in a dress before a company dinner, she would touch my shoulder and say, "That's pretty, honey, but maybe wear the navy one. It's more serious." If Tate interrupted adults, she called him confident. If I corrected a number, she said I had a tendency to make people uncomfortable. "You don't always have to be right," she told me once, while fastening pearl earrings in her bedroom mirror. "I'm not trying to be right," I said. "The invoice total is wrong." She looked at me through the mirror. "That is exactly what I mean. I learned to speak less. Not because I had nothing to say, because every fact I brought into the room seemed to cost me warmth. After college, I did what everyone expected and came back. My grandfather was sick again, and my father said the company needed family nearby. I had an offer in Chicago at a financial advisory firm, the kind of job that makes you feel taller just reading the letter. My father stood in the plant parking lot with his hands in his coat pockets and said, "I won't tell you what to do, Marin. I just hope you remember what built you. So I stayed. That is one of those sentences that looks noble until you notice who benefits from it. For 3 years, I worked in the company office without a real title. I handled receivables, vendor calls, late shipment explanations, insurance renewals, whatever nobody else wanted. My paycheck said administrative coordinator. My day said operations manager. My father introduced me at events as our numbers girl. Tate was in college then, changing majors and coming home with ideas. He wanted a company podcast. He wanted branded hats. He wanted to sell direct to consumers. Though we made components nobody bought unless they already owned a machine shop or a repair business. My father loved every suggestion. Fresh eyes, he would say. When I pointed out that our aging inventory system was causing duplicate orders and late fulfillment, he sighed. Marin, you always go straight to what's wrong. Because that was where they sent me. Eventually, I left, not dramatically. No slammed doors. No speech at Thanksgiving. I accepted a job with a restructuring firm in Cleveland, packed my townhouse with used boxes from the plant, and trained the new office manager for 2 weeks because I did not want Rosa from payroll to suffer for my exit. My father said, "You'll be back." My mother cried just enough to make me feel guilty and said, "We're proud of you, sweetheart. We just hope this doesn't make you hard." Tate hugged me with one arm and asked if he could use my old office. The restructuring firm taught me names for things I had already been doing since childhood. Creditor prioritization, covenant breaches, collateral schedules, working capital, secured notes, voting rights. Governance risk. I learned how companies lie before they fail. They call debt temporary pressure. They call missing records administrative lag. They call family control continuity. They blame markets, weather, banks, software, employees, anything except the person at the head of the table who refuses to read the report. I was good at the work, not flashy, not loud, but good. I could look at 12 months of bank statements and tell you which vendor was about to sue. I could read board minutes and know who was being protected. I could smell panic in a balance sheet before the owners admitted they were afraid. My family found this funny. At Sunday dinners, my father would ask, "How many spreadsheets did you rescue this week?" Tate once said, "Marin works with companies after the real leaders mess up." I looked at him across my mother's dining table and said, "That's one way to describe it." My mother gave me the look. The one that said, "Don't embarrass him by answering accurately." I didn't. By then, my grandfather had died. The plant had expanded too quickly, and my father had begun believing his own old speeches. He liked public growth, new banners, bigger orders, a second warehouse lease we did not need. Tate came into the company full-time after losing interest in a logistics startup he had joined for 9 months. His title changed 3 times in 2 years. Director of Client Strategy, Vice President of Development, Vice President of Growth. The work did not change much. He took meetings, ordered lunches, used words like scale and brand alignment, and left before the uncomfortable calls. Meanwhile, Rosa Kim still ran payroll from a desk near the copy room. Rosa had been at Alder Industrial since I was in high school. She was small, brisk, and exact. With reading glasses, she wore on a chain and a habit of writing important notes on blue sticky pads. She remembered every employee's kid, every garnishment order, every vacation balance, and every time management promised something it forgot. Rosa was not warm in a decorative way. She was warm like a working furnace, practical, necessary, not interested in applause. When I came by the plant after leaving, usually because my father had asked me to look at one thing, Rosa would hand me coffee in one of the old green mugs and say, "You eating?" Not "how are you?" Not "we miss you." Just, "You eating?" The first time she did it, after my grandfather died, I almost cried into the mug. I didn't. The crisis came on a Thursday in February, the kind of wet, cold night where the parking lot lights make everything look gray. My father called at 8:42 p.m. I remember the time because I had just taken off my shoes and set my laptop on the kitchen table. My dinner was still in the paper takeout bag. I saw his name and almost let it go to voicemail, but some old part of me answered before I decided. "Marin," he said. "We have a timing problem." That was my father's phrase for disaster. A timing problem could mean a late truck, an angry bank, a customer threatening penalties, or a hole in the roof. He believed changing the name of a thing made it smaller. What kind of timing problem? The bank line is temporarily unavailable. I closed my eyes. Frozen? He did not answer right away. In the silence, I heard voices behind him. Office voices. Late-night voices. The company was not supposed to sound like that after 8. Dad, we're working through it. How much payroll is due? Another silence. That was when I stood up. How much payroll is due and when? He exhaled through his nose. 486,000 by Monday morning, including taxes and benefits. I looked at my takeout bag. It had left a little circle of steam on the table. Why is the line frozen? Technical review. Dad, Marin, this is not the time to interrogate me. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because he had called the one person trained to ask exactly those questions, and then resented the sound of them. Send me the bank notice, the current cash report, accounts receivable aging, and payroll file. We don't need a full autopsy. We need a bridge. A bridge has terms. He lowered his voice. This is family. There it was. The word they used when they wanted my labor without the inconvenience of my judgment. I drove to the plant because I knew he would not send everything unless I stood there. The office looked worse than I expected. The overhead lights were too bright. Someone had left a half-eaten sandwich on the conference table. Tate was there in a quarter-zip sweater, scrolling through his own phone with the focused expression of a man hoping a crisis would resolve itself before he had to understand it. My mother sat at the end of the table in a wool coat, her purse still on her lap, like she had been invited to witness something unpleasant but temporary. Rosa was at her desk, printing payroll reports. She looked up when I came in and said, "You ate?" "No." She disappeared into the break room and came back with vending machine peanut butter crackers and coffee in the chipped green mug. My father paced. "The bank overreacted," he said. I read the notice. The bank had not overreacted. The company had tripped 2 covenants, submitted late financials, and failed to disclose a vendor lien threat. The line was frozen pending review. There were incoming receivables, but not in time. Tate leaned back. "Couldn't we just delay payroll a couple days? People would understand." Rosa stopped printing. No one spoke. Then she said very quietly, "No, they would not." I looked at the payroll list, names, hours, deductions, direct deposits. People who had worked in a cold plant all week and did not care that Raymond Alder had overextended inventory to impress a customer. "How much is actually needed to get through Monday?" I asked. Rosa slid a blue sticky note toward me. The number was a little over 600,000 when payroll taxes, vendor holds, and bank fees were included. My father saw me looking at it. "We can repay you in a few weeks," he said. "Receivables are coming. This is just a family bridge." I looked at him, alone. His mouth tightened. "Marin, a secured loan. With documents, I will not wire $600,000 into a company with frozen credit and no terms." My mother made a small sound, almost wounded. "Do you hear yourself?" she asked. "Your father is asking for help." I heard him. He shouldn't have to negotiate with his daughter. I turned, the mug slowly on the table. The chipped side faced away from me, white letters fading near my thumb. "He is not negotiating with his daughter," I said. "He is borrowing from a creditor." Tate laughed once. "God, Marin." My father lifted a hand toward him without looking away from me. "Fine," he said. "Paper it however you need. We are not missing payroll." That was the closest he came to acknowledging the stakes. Not that I was saving him. Not that I was risking my own future. Not that the company had been mismanaged into a corner. Just that payroll could not bounce. I called an attorney I trusted from Cleveland. He was not thrilled to hear from me at 10:16 p.m., but he had worked enough distressed deals to know emergencies do not observe office hours. We used a template. We adjusted terms. We secured the note against specific receivables and equipment. We included protections I insisted on because I knew my family. Rosa stayed. At one point, close to midnight, she set another coffee beside me and said, "I can witness if you need." My mother had gone home by then. Tate had gone to get air and never returned. My father sat in his office with the door half closed, making calls in a voice he wanted people to hear. At 1:17 a.m., the wire confirmation came through. Rosa printed it. The old printer made that grinding sound it always made before catching. She took the paper from the tray, looked at it, then at me. "You want a copy?" "Yes." I said. File it somewhere safe. She folded it once and tucked it into a payroll folder marked February Emergency. I did not know how much that small act would matter later. By Monday morning, the employees were paid. By Wednesday, my father had told the bank that Family Resources had stabilized operations. By Friday, he was telling vendors the freeze had been a routine review. By the next board meeting, the minutes said management had secured temporary liquidity support. My name was not in the minutes. When I asked my father to correct it, he said, "Let's not make this more formal than it has to be." I said, "It is formal. You signed the note, and we'll honor it." He said that like honoring it meant I should stop mentioning it. For a while, I let the silence sit there. Not because I forgot. I never forgot money. Not because I was afraid. Not exactly. I think some part of me wanted to see whether they would choose the truth without being forced. Spring came, then summer. Alder Industrial recovered enough to breathe, but not enough to repay me. Receivables came in and went out. Vendors got partial payments. The bank resumed limited credit under stricter reporting. Tate ordered a new company sign for the lobby. It was black metal, expensive looking, with raised silver letters. He sent a photo to the family group chat. "New era," he wrote. My mother replied with 3 clapping emojis. My father wrote, "Proud of you, son." I stared at my phone in the parking lot outside a client site and waited to feel amused. I didn't. At the end of July, an email hit my inbox by mistake. The subject line was Draft Annual Report, Board Review. It came from a junior admin at the company, probably using an old distribution list. I almost deleted it. I had a client call in 12 minutes and no desire to read another polished version of my father's reality. Then I saw the attachment name. Alder Annual Meeting Mission Draft PDF. I opened it. The first pages were what I expected. Revenue charts with the bad quarters softened by friendly colors. Photos of employees wearing safety glasses. A note from Raymond about resilience. Then I reached the section called Continuity and Family Leadership. My brother's face filled half the page. Tate Alder represents the 3rd generation of leadership at Alder Industrial Components, bringing innovation, relationship building, and a forward-looking growth strategy to a company rooted in family values. I kept reading. During a temporary liquidity challenge earlier this year, the Alder family rallied around the company with private support, demonstrating the unity and sacrifice that have defined our leadership for nearly 5 decades. Private support, family rallied, unity, sacrifice. There was no liability line for my note, no repayment schedule, no disclosure, no mention that the company owed me $600,000 plus interest. I sat there in my car, with the air conditioning blowing against my hands, and felt something inside me go very still. The annual meeting was less than 3 months away. That was the first time I noticed the missing line. I called the junior admin and told her I had received something by mistake. She was flustered and apologized twice. I told her not to worry. Then I saved a copy. After my client call, I pulled the loan documents from my encrypted folder and read them again. Every page, every signature, every clause. There are moments in life when anger does not feel hot. It feels like a light being turned on in a room you had been cleaning in the dark. 2 days later, Gwen Sato called. I knew Gwen only professionally. She had been brought in as corporate secretary after one of the minority shareholders complained that my father's board minutes were too casual. Gwen was in her early 60s, a former governance attorney with a soft voice and a way of pausing after questions that made careless people fill the silence badly. "Marin," she said, "I'm updating the shareholder registry and creditor disclosures before the annual meeting." Good. I noticed the February note. I hoped someone would. Another pause. "Do you intend to submit any notice before the proxy deadline?" I looked at the wall across from my desk. On it, I had a framed print from my first restructuring case. Not pretty. Just a black and white photo of an empty factory floor. After what helped the company sell assets and pay employees before liquidation. It reminded me that endings could be handled cleanly if people stopped lying early enough. "What deadline are you using?" I asked. September 15th. My father had not mentioned any proxy deadline. Of course he hadn't. Gwen said, "I'm asking because if there are any changes that affect voting rights or board motions, they need to be noticed properly." She did not explain further. She did not have to. I had written enough distress debt reports to hear the careful doorway she was opening. "I'll review," I said. "I assumed you would." After we hung up, I sat very still for a few minutes. Then I opened the note again. My lawyer had included terms that night, because I had insisted my family might minimize the debt. He had raised an eyebrow over video and said, "You sure you need all this for your parents?" I had said yes before I knew how right I was. The note had protections tied to repayment, disclosure, management changes, and certain governance actions. At the time, my father had been too focused on getting money wired to care. My mother signed as board witness with her lips pressed tight. Tate did not sign anything, though later he would speak as if he had carried the company on his back. Over the next month, I did what I do for a living. I built a file, not a revenge file, not a diary of hurt feelings, a file that could survive a room full of people who did not want to believe me. I requested updated financials as creditor. My father ignored the first email. I sent a second, copying Gwen. He replied within 20 minutes. "Let's not overcomplicate this, Marin." I saved it. I asked for the current shareholder list. Gwen sent the version I was entitled to review. My father called me 7 minutes later. "What are you doing?" "Reviewing records." "For what purpose?" "The one listed in my request." He hated that answer. "Marin, if this is about the annual report language, we can add a thank you somewhere. A thank you." I remember looking at my phone and almost smiling. "You owe me a little more than a thank you. That is exactly the tone your mother worries about." There it was again, the old move. Make the fact less important than the way I stated it. "I'm not discussing my tone," he exhaled. "Your brother is stepping into a larger role. I need you to be supportive. Is there a board-approved succession motion? We're making an announcement." That was not my question. He was quiet. Then "This is why people don't include you in things, Marin. You make everything adversarial." I wrote that sentence down after we hung up. Not because it surprised me. Because when people tell you their strategy, you should keep the record. Aunt Lenore called me the next Sunday. My father's sister had always existed at the edge of family events. A thin woman with silver hair, red lipstick, and the tired patience of someone who had watched Raymond become himself in slow motion. She owned a small number of shares from my grandfather's estate, enough to attend meetings, but not enough to control anything alone. "I received the annual meeting packet," she said. "I haven't yet. You are not in it. I know." A long pause. "Your grandfather would have hated that." I looked out my kitchen window at the neighbor's maple tree, still green but starting to yellow at the edges. "I don't know what Grandpa would have done," I said. "I do," she said. "He would have made your father sit down and read the whole thing out loud until he was ashamed." That almost made me laugh. Then Lenore said, "I have an old packet from when Harold divided the shares after your grandmother died. Raymond told me later it had all been simplified, but I never liked the way he said it." I drove to her condo that afternoon. She made tea I did not want and gave me a manila envelope with my grandfather's handwriting across the front. Inside were old shareholder records, board notes, and a copy of a letter from my grandfather to Raymond. The letter was not dramatic. My grandfather had not been a dramatic man. It said family leadership had to be earned by stewardship, not assumed by birth order or volume. It said Marin had a head for the business. It said Tate was still a child and should not be treated as a promise. I read it twice. Lenore watched me. "I should have given that to you years ago," she said. "Why didn't you?" Her eyes watered, but she did not look away. "Because your father makes silence feel easier than conflict." That was her almost apology. Not enough to fix anything, but honest enough that I could use it. She signed her proxy to me that day, not because I asked her in a grand way. I explained the meeting. I explained the financial misstatements. I explained that if Raymond pushed through a succession without correcting the record, it could hurt the company. Lenore picked up her pen. "I'm tired," she said, "but not too tired for this." By September 15th, I had more than my aunt's proxy. A retired vendor who held shares from a debt settlement years earlier called me after receiving the packet. He said Raymond had been dodging questions about repayment terms. "What's he hiding?" he asked. I said, "Enough." He sent his proxy, 2 former employees with small holdings called Rosa, to ask whether the company was safe. Rosa told them she could not advise them how to vote. Then she gave them Gwen's number and mine. I did not pressure anyone. I answered questions. I sent documents when I was allowed. I said, "Talk to your own advisor." So many times that one man laughed and said, "You really aren't your father's daughter in that way." I did not know whether he meant it as a compliment. I took it as one. Meanwhile, my family planned the annual meeting like a coronation. Tate texted me a photo of the stage mock-up. "Big night coming," he wrote. "Try to smile, okay? It'll look weird if you sulk." I stared at the message. Then I saved a screenshot. My mother called 2 days later and asked what I was wearing. That was Celia Alder's way of pretending everything had already been settled. "I haven't decided." "Well, nothing too dark. This is a celebration." "For whom?" she sighed softly. "Marin," I waited. "Your father wants this to go smoothly. I'm sure he does, and Tate is nervous. Tate should be prepared." "He is prepared. He's worked very hard on his speech." I looked at the 3 envelopes on my desk. One held certified copies of the loan documents. One held wire confirmations and correspondence. One held proxy acknowledgments and registry updates. "I'm glad he has a speech." My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know, sweetheart, not everyone's contribution has to be public." I looked down at my hand. I had pressed my thumb into the edge of an envelope hard enough to leave a half-moon dent. "Does that apply to Tate too? That is not fair." "No," I said, "it isn't." She changed the subject. "The week before the meeting, I stopped by the plant. I told myself it was to pick up a vendor file Gwen had left for me. That was partly true. But I also wanted to see the building before whatever happened next." The lobby had been repainted. The old framed photo of my grandfather standing beside the first loading bay had been moved from the front wall to the hallway near the restrooms. In its place was the new black metal sign Tate had ordered, Alder Industrial Components. Under it, in smaller letters, "Built on Family, Driven by Future." The receptionist, a new woman I did not know, asked me to sign in as a visitor. I almost told her I knew where I was going. Instead, I signed the tablet. Under company affiliation, I wrote creditor. Rosa found me in the break room. The old green mugs were gone from the shelf. In their place were matte black mugs with Tate's new logo printed in silver. They looked expensive and slightly too tall for the coffee machine. Rosa followed my eyes. "They boxed the old ones," she said. "Of course they did." She opened the supply closet. On the floor, beside extra paper towels and a broken fan, was a cardboard box full of green mugs. Some chipped, some stained. One had a faded smear near the rim that looked like old lipstick. I picked it up. The handle was warm from the closet air. "Want it?" Rosa asked. I almost said no. Then I said, "Not yet." She nodded as if that made sense. Rosa did not ask me what I planned to do at the meeting. She did not ask if I was scared. She pulled a blue sticky note from her pocket and handed it to me. It had a list of employee names. "What's this?" "People asking if benefits are safe." I read the names. Some I knew, some were new. "I can't promise what the board will do. I know. Rosa." She looked at me over her glasses. "They trust you more than they trust them," she said. "I figured you should know." That was all. No speech. No embrace. No declaration that I deserved better. Just a list. I folded it and put it in my bag. On the day of the annual meeting, it rained until 4, then stopped all at once, leaving the streets shiny and the air heavy. I wore a charcoal dress, low heels, and the small silver watch my grandfather had given me when I graduated college. My mother had once said the watch was too plain for formal events. I wore it anyway. In my bag were the 3 envelopes. In my left hand was the company packet that had arrived at my house 4 days late. My name appeared once, in 8-point type, on the attendance list under registered guests and observers. Not shareholder, not creditor, not former operations staff, not family. Guest. When I reached the Harborview Grand, the lobby was full of people wearing name tags and holding programs. The hotel had set out water stations with lemon slices floating in glass. Dispensers and someone from Tate's team had arranged black and silver signs pointing toward Ballroom C. I paused at the registration table. The young man checking names smiled. "Name?" "Marin Alder." His eyes flicked down. Then he looked at the woman beside him. She was from the event company, not the company itself. She searched a second list and frowned. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't see a family table assignment." "I'm not surprised." She looked embarrassed. Before she could say more, Gwen Sato appeared beside me. She wore a navy suit and held a slim folder against her chest. "Ms. Alder is confirmed," Gwen said. "Please mark her present." The young man nodded quickly. "Of course." Gwen looked at me, not warmly, not coldly, professionally. "Do you have everything you need?" "Yes." "Good." The report was certified at 5:32. I heard the words. I understood them, but I did not let my face change. "Thank you." Gwen inclined her head and walked toward the ballroom. I did not know yet how important the exact time would sound when she said it later into a microphone. Inside Ballroom C, the stage had been set with 3 chairs, a podium, a long table for the secretary and counsel, and a screen showing the Alder Industrial logo. Round tables filled the front half of the room. Rows of chairs filled the back for employees and smaller shareholders. My parents' table was front and center. There were place cards for Raymond Alder, Celia Alder, Tate Alder, Erin Vale, who was Tate's girlfriend, 2 board members, and the bank representative. No Marin. A server asked if I needed help finding my seat. Before I could answer, Rosa stood from a row near the aisle and lifted one hand. "I saved you one," she said. It was not a dramatic rescue. Just a chair on the end of a rows beside payroll, shipping, and 2 floor supervisors who looked at me with careful kindness and then looked away to spare me the performance of gratitude. I sat down. Rosa handed me a paper cup of coffee. "Hotel coffee," she said. "Not my fault." I smiled for the first time that evening. Noted. From the front of the room, Tate saw me. He leaned toward his girlfriend, whispered something, and both of them glanced back. Erin looked uncomfortable. Tate did not. He stood and came over with a relaxed walk, like the whole ballroom was already his office. "Marin," he said, "there you are. Here I am. Mom was worried you might not come." "That sounds like Mom." His eyes dropped to the folder on my lap. "What's that, paperwork?" He grinned. "Of course it is." I did not answer. He rocked back on his heels. "Listen, tonight is big for Dad. Try not to get weirded about the program, okay?" "What about the program?" His grin flickered, just slightly. "I just mean there were space limits. Marketing makes those calls. Marketing erased my name?" He lowered his voice. "Don't do this. I'm sitting here drinking coffee." "Exactly," he said, like that proved his point. "Just sit, be supportive. You know how Dad gets when he feels challenged." I looked at his black leather folder tucked under his arm. "Speech ready?" He smiled again. "Some of us came prepared." I looked at him for a moment longer than he liked. Then I said, "I hope so." He blinked, then laughed in that sharp little way he had picked up from my father. "You always have to make things ominous." "No," I said, "only accurate." His face hardened, but before he could answer, my mother appeared behind him. "Marin," she said. Her voice was soft enough that anyone nearby would hear concern instead of warning. She kissed the air beside my cheek. Her perfume smelled like white flowers and powder. She touched my sleeve, fingers light on the charcoal fabric. For 1 second, I saw the almost moment. Her eyes moved from my face to the missing family table, to the program in my hand, to Tate's folder. Her lips parted. Something human crossed her face. I thought, foolishly maybe. Then she squeezed my sleeve and said, "Tonight is not the time to make this about you." There it was. Not even unkind by the standards she used for herself, just a door closing quietly. I looked at her hand until she removed it. "I understand," I said. She seemed relieved. That hurt more than the sentence. Because she thought I meant I would behave. I meant I understood she was not safe to wait for anymore. The meeting began at 6. Gwen called the room to order. Her voice carried clearly through the ballroom speakers. She confirmed notice, quorum, voting procedures, and the presence of the board. My father stood beside the podium with his hands folded, wearing a dark suit and a blue tie. He looked handsome in the way older executives look handsome when everyone has agreed not to ask them direct questions. He welcomed the shareholders. He thanked the employees. He thanked the bank for its continued partnership. He thanked my mother for keeping the Alder family values at the center of everything we do. He thanked Tate for bringing energy, optimism, and strategic vision. Then the screen changed to a slide titled, "Through Every Season." There were photos. My grandfather cutting a ribbon, my father shaking hands with a governor, Tate standing beside the new lobby sign, my mother at a charity golf outing, no photo of the February payroll night, no old break room, no green mug, No Rosa sitting beside a printer at 1 in the morning while a wire confirmation came through. My father spoke about the liquidity challenge. He called it a temporary market-driven squeeze. The bank representative at the front table looked down. My father said, as we always have, the Alder family came together privately, without drama, to protect our employees and keep this company moving forward. Without drama. I felt Rosa shift beside me. The room heard a family announcement. I heard a motion being made too early, my father continued. And that is why tonight is not only an annual meeting. It is a celebration of continuity, a celebration of the next generation, a celebration of the future. Tate lowered his eyes modestly, badly. My mother smiled at the room like she had already won. Then my father looked toward me. At first, I thought he would skip me entirely. But he did not. That was his mistake. He wanted the room to know my place. I know some of you remember my daughter Maren from years ago, he said. She has been present at certain moments in this company's history, and we appreciate the support she has offered as family. Present at certain moments, support. As family, a few heads turned. My hand rested on the folder. My father's eyes stayed on mine. But let me be clear, he said. Tonight is about the shareholders, the board, and the future leadership of Alder Industrial. I did not move. He smiled more tightly. You're here tonight as a guest, Maren, not an heir. The room changed temperature, not literally. The air conditioning still hummed. Glasses still sweated on white tablecloths. Someone near the back coughed, but something shifted. People who had known me since I was a teenager looked suddenly interested in their programs. Tate pressed his lips together like he was trying not to smile. My mother closed her eyes for half a second, not in regret, in irritation that my father had made it so blunt. I stood, not quickly, just enough to make the microphone runner near the aisle panic, and glanced toward Gwen. My father lifted his palm. Maren, please sit down. I haven't said anything. This is not the time. I looked at Gwen. She was writing. My father followed my gaze and seemed to remember there was a record. His tone changed. We will have time for comments after the formal succession announcement. Is there a motion on the floor? He smiled at the room. As I said, Maren has always had a gift for procedure. A few people chuckled uneasily. Tate leaned toward his girlfriend again. She did not smile this time. My father continued. No formal motion has been made yet. I am simply recognizing the direction of the company and the family. And the shareholder vote. His jaw moved once. That will occur in due course. I nodded and sat down. I did not need to win that minute. I needed him to keep talking. The next 30 minutes were a study in controlled arrogance. My father presented numbers without context. Tate gave a short vision preview before the official succession vote, which Gwen allowed because it was framed as informational. He talked about modernization, digital dashboards, brand expansion, and moving beyond the old repair shop mindset. Several employees in the back row stared at him blankly. At one point, he said, "We can't be trapped by how things have always been done." Rosa whispered, "He still can't approve a time card without calling me." I pressed my lips together. My mother spoke next. She talked about legacy, community, family unity, and stewardship. Her voice was warm. She knew how to make a room feel included. That had always been her gift. She could place a soft cloth over a sharp object and ask why your hand was bleeding. Then came the printed succession resolution. Gwen read it into the record. The resolution recommended that Tate Alder be elected chair designate, with Raymond remaining board chair through a transition period. It also recommended expanding Tate's executive authority immediately. My father looked pleased. Tate opened his black leather folder. He was ready. Gwen said, "Before discussion, are there any disclosures, amendments, or challenges related to voting authority or eligibility?" The room was quiet. This was the moment most people miss because it sounds boring. Families like mine rely on people missing boring moments. My father said, "None from management." Gwen looked at the board table. No one spoke. Then she looked toward my section. I stood again. This time, no one chuckled. My father's expression sharpened. Maren. I walked to the floor microphone near the aisle. My heels made almost no sound on the carpet. The microphone was slightly too tall. I adjusted it down. That small action seemed to annoy my father more than if I had shouted. "Yes, Miss Alder," Gwen said. My father interrupted. "Gwen, With respect, my daughter is not a voting shareholder for purposes of this motion. Gwen looked at him. With respect, Mr. Alder, I will determine voting authority according to the registry and certified proxies. A little murmur moved through the room. My father's smile hardened. Marin is here as an observer. She has no equity, no office, and no authority to interrupt this succession. There it was. He had said it clearly. No equity, no office, no authority. The sentence landed in the microphone. It entered the minutes. It reached the bank representative, the board, the shareholders, and the employees. It reached Gwen's pen. The room heard an insult. Gwen heard a record. I looked at my father. Then I said, Madam Secretary, before the succession motion proceeds, will you please confirm the voting report certified at 5:32 this evening? Tate laughed under his breath. What is she doing? He said. Not quietly enough. My mother turned toward Gwen with a look that said this was all becoming distasteful. Gwen opened the folder in front of her. Raymond stepped away from the podium. Gwen, this is unnecessary. I disagree, Gwen said. Her voice was still calm. She lifted the first page. For the record, the voting report was certified prior to tonight's meeting, at 5:32 p.m., based on the updated shareholder registry, valid proxy submissions, and notices received before the September 15th deadline. My father stared at her. What notices? Gwen did not answer him directly. She read, total voting interests present in person or by valid proxy represent 82.4% of eligible voting power. Tate shifted. My mother's hands tightened around the edge of her program. Gwen continued. Of that voting power, the controlling position for contested board matters is held or represented by Marin Alder. For a moment, the room did not understand. People heard the words, but they did not fit the story they had been given. I watched the sentence travel across the ballroom and fail, at first, to find a place to land. Then the bank representative looked up. A board member whispered, What? My father said, That is impossible. Gwen looked at him over the top of the paper. No, Mr. Alder, it is certified. Tate stood halfway. She doesn't own anything. I turned my head and looked at him. He sat back down. My father's face had gone red first, not white. The white came later. There has been a mistake, he said. Marin loaned the company money as family support. That does not confer voting control. Gwen opened another section of the folder. This is a secured convertible note executed on February 9th of this year. My mother closed her eyes again. This time it was not irritation. Gwen read the company name, the date, the principal amount, the signatures. Raymond Alder, Celia Alder, Marin Alder. Then she read one paragraph, not the whole document, just enough. The clause stated that if the company failed to repay the note by the agreed date, misstated or omitted the obligation in official materials, or initiated material changes in executive control without satisfying the debt, the holder could exercise conversion and voting rights as set forth in the attached schedule. My father's face changed. There it was. Not just shock, recognition. He remembered the night, the conference table, the printer, my lawyer on video, my voice saying, a bridge has terms. His own voice saying, fine, paper it however you need. He looked at the signature first. Then he looked at me. Finally, he understood. Tate did not. This is insane, he said. You're saying she bought the company because she wrote one check? No, I said. My voice sounded quieter than his, but the microphone carried it. I am saying the company borrowed money it did not repay, then tried to erase the obligation while changing control. Tate looked at my father. Dad? My father did not answer. Gwen continued because that was her job. Conversion notice was timely filed. Supporting documentation was received. The registry was updated. Additional proxies were validated prior to the deadline. My mother turned toward me. You did this behind our backs? I looked at her. No. I did it through the process. That line seemed to hit her harder than anger would have, because process had always been something my family used when it helped them, and dismissed when it protected someone else. Raymond stepped toward the secretary's table. I object to this being read in a public meeting. Gwen folded her hands over the packet. The succession motion is public. The voting authority is material to that motion. This is a family matter. The bank representative made a small sound, not a laugh exactly, more like disbelief escaping before manners could stop it. Gwen said, No, Mr. Alder, this is a corporate governance matter. Rosa stood, not dramatically. She did not rush the stage. She simply rose from the row beside me with a folder in her hand. Gwen looked at her. "Miss Kim?" Rosa walked to the side table and handed the folder to Gwen. My father stared at her, as if the payroll manager had suddenly come visible for the first time in his life. "What is that?" he demanded. Rosa looked at him. "The February emergency payroll file." Her voice shook once on February, then steadied. Gwen opened it. Inside was the wire confirmation printed at 1:17 a.m., the payroll list, the bank notice copy, and Rosa's handwritten note. "Funds received from Marin Alder, payroll released." My throat tightened then. Not when my father insulted me. Not when Tate smirked. Not when my mother warned me to stay small then. Because Rosa had saved the ordinary paper, the proof of the night they wanted to turn into fog. My father said, "Rosa, you had no right." "She had every right to maintain payroll records," Gwen said. Aunt Lenore stood next. She was 2 rows from the front, wearing a burgundy jacket and holding her cane with both hands. Raymond looked at her like she had betrayed him. Maybe she had, or maybe she had finally stopped betraying herself. Lenore did not make a speech. She simply said, "My proxy stands with Marin." Then she sat down. The room was fully awake now. People whispered. Chairs shifted. Someone near the back said, "I knew she was there that night." Another person said, 600,000? A vendor I had known for years leaned toward his wife and murmured something I could not hear. Tate's black folder was still open on the podium. I could see the first line of his speech from where I stood. "Thank you, Dad, for trusting me with the future." I looked away. Gwen said, "The succession resolution may proceed to a vote if the chair wishes to call it." My father's mouth opened. Nothing came out. It is strange, watching a man who has controlled every room in your life realize that the room has rules he cannot charm. After a moment, Raymond said, "We need a recess." I spoke before Gwen could answer. "No." Every face turned toward me. I did not raise my voice. The motion was introduced. Voting authority has been challenged and confirmed. The shareholders are present. I call the question. My father stared at me. "You don't know what you are doing." That almost made me sad. Because even then, even with the documents in front of him, even after Gwen had read his own signature into the record, he reached for the oldest version of me. The girl at the reception desk, the daughter holding plates, the person he could correct back into place. Gwen looked at the board table. The question has been called. The vote happened faster than I expected. Not emotionally. Emotionally, it felt like walking through deep water. But procedurally, it moved cleanly. Gwen read the resolution. Voting cards were collected where needed. Proxies were applied. Electronic votes from registered holders were confirmed. The room filled with the quiet scratch and shuffle of people committing themselves to a side. Tate did not speak. My mother whispered something to him and he shook his head hard. My father stood beside the podium, no longer behind it. That mattered to me. A minute earlier, he had owned the stage. Now he stood near it like a man waiting for permission. Gwen received the final count, checked it with the assistant secretary, and read the result. The succession resolution fails. The words were plain. No thunder. No gas big enough for a movie. Just a collective intake of breath, and then the sound of Tate closing his folder. Gwen continued. "A motion has been submitted by the controlling voting holder to elect Marin Alder as chair of the board, effective immediately, subject to transition provisions and independent review." My mother turned to me with wet eyes. "Not sorrow, strategy. Marin," she said softly, though she was too far from the microphone for most people to hear. "Honey. Honey." The word she used when she wanted me to become easier. Raymond said, "This is absurd. She has no executive experience running a manufacturing company." I looked at the employees in the back, at Rosa, at Mr. Haskell from shipping, older now, his beard gray, at the people whose names had been on that blue sticky note. Then I looked back at my father. I know what happens when one isn't run honestly. Gwen read the motion. The vote passed. That was the part my father never imagined. He had prepared for embarrassment, maybe for an argument, maybe for me to demand recognition or repayment or a line in the program. He had not prepared for losing. When Gwen announced that I had been elected chair, the room did not erupt. It settled. That is the only way I can describe it. The air, the attention, the fear, all of it settled into a new shape. I walked from the floor microphone to the front. Gwen offered me the chair beside the secretary's table, not the podium. I appreciated that. The podium had my father's fingerprints all over it. I sat. For a second, my hands trembled under the table. Rosa saw. She did not make a face. She pushed the paper cup of bad hotel coffee closer to me across the aisle with 2 fingers. I almost laughed. Then I took it. Gwen said, "Madam Chair, do you wish to make any immediate motions, Madam Chair?" My mother flinched. I heard it. Not a sound exactly. A change in her breath. I said yes. First, I move for an independent financial and governance review, including related party transactions, executive expenses, creditor disclosures, and the February liquidity event. Tate went pale. Second, discretionary executive spending is frozen pending review. Tate stood. "You can't just..." Gwen looked at him. He sat. Third, I said, payroll, benefits, and active vendor payment plans are to remain protected during the transition. No employee loses wages because management created this fight. The back rows were quiet. Then someone clapped once. I never found out who. The sound was awkward and small and quickly stopped, but I remember it more clearly than any applause could deserve. My father leaned toward me. "This is not how you handle family." I looked at the table in front of me, at the certified tally, at the wire confirmation, at the program where my name was missing. "No," I said. "This is how I handle the company." He recoiled as if I had slapped him. The meeting ended under Gwen's direction, not my father's. That alone was a visible consequence. People lined up afterward in strange little clusters. Some wanted to shake my father's hand and did not know if they still should. Some wanted to speak to me and did not know what to say. Employees hovered near the back, waiting to see if the ground under them was safe. The local business reporter, who had come for a friendly succession announcement, stood near the coffee station, typing quickly on her phone. Tate disappeared into the hallway for 4 minutes, then returned red-eyed and furious. My mother approached me first. She had repaired her face. That was how I thought of it. The public expression had been put back on. Soft mouth, damp eyes, tilted head, a mother wounded by division. "Marin," she said, "we need to talk privately. We can schedule a board-related conversation through Gwen." Her eyes flicked toward the people nearby. "Don't be cruel." I almost answered too quickly. Instead, I let the sentence breathe. Cruel, not the erasure, not the lie, not calling me a guest in front of 300 people. Cruel was my refusal to help her move the damage into a private room. "I'm not discussing this alone. I am your mother." I know, that was all I gave her. Her mouth trembled. For years, that tremble had worked on me. It had made me soften statements, take smaller portions, apologize for accuracy, stay after dinners to wash dishes while Tate watched television. That night, I saw the tremble and felt tired. Raymond came up behind her. His face was no longer white. It had settled into a gray anger. "You have no idea what you've done," he said. Gwen, standing 3 feet away, looked at him over her glasses. I said, "I know exactly what I did." "No, you don't. You embarrassed this family." I looked around the ballroom, at the employees still seated, at the board members speaking in low tones, at Shazata standing beside the aisle with her arms crossed, at Tate's unopened speech folder left on a chair near the stage. I did not write the program. His jaw tightened. I did not call myself a guest. My mother whispered, "Please, that please had a history. Please be easy. Please be quiet. Please do not make him angrier. Please help us pretend we did not do what everyone saw." Tate came back then, moving fast. "Are you happy?" he said. His voice cracked on happy. No, that seemed to confuse him. He wanted me triumphant, cruel, something he could hate cleanly. I was exhausted. "You ruined me in there. You had not been elected to anything. You know what I mean." "Yes," I said. "I do." He stepped closer. "All because you couldn't stand Dad choosing me." I looked at him for a long moment. "Tate, Dad choosing you is not what failed tonight." His face twisted. The old pattern tugged at me. "Explain it gently. Protect him from the full shape of himself. Make the truth small enough that he could carry it without dropping it." I did not pick it up. Gwen interrupted. "Mr. Alder, the audit will require your expense records, travel authorizations, vendor entertainment logs, and company card statements for the past 18 months. Tate turned to her. "What?" my father said. "That is unnecessary." Gwen looked at me. I said, "It stands." Tate stared at me then with real fear. Not fear of me, exactly. Fear that the air around him had changed. Fear that the family force field had dropped. Fear that the story where he was talented, chosen, and misunderstood might have to meet receipts. My mother touched my arm. I stepped back. Her hand fell. That small movement landed between us. She noticed that she noticed. For a moment, she looked less polished, older, almost lost. Then she said, "We were only trying to protect the company." There it was, the pivot, protection. Family unity, misunderstanding, private conversation. Every phrase people use when the truth arrives with witnesses. I said, "You misstated a debt." Raymond snapped. "We were going to repay you." When? He looked away. The silence answered for him. Celia said, "Your father was under pressure." So was I. "You didn't tell us you were planning this." I asked for corrected records. I asked for disclosures. I asked for the shareholder list. I asked whether there was a board-approved succession motion. My mother swallowed. "You could have warned us." I did. "No, you sent emails." "Yes." The plainness of that answer seemed to offend her, because emails were not supposed to count when feelings were available. Raymond leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Marin, listen to me. We can still fix this. You resign the chair, we issue a corrected statement, and we handle repayment quietly. I will not let this company become a stage for your resentment." The old me would have heard an offer. The woman sitting there heard a confession. "Gwen," I said, "please note that Mr. Alder has requested I resign after a certified shareholder vote and offered corrected disclosure only after public challenge." Raymond recoiled. "Don't put words in my mouth." I repeated yours, Gwen wrote. That was when my father finally stopped talking, not because he had nothing else to say. Because for the first time in our lives, someone was writing it down where he could not edit it later. The next hour passed in pieces. Board members stayed. The bank representative requested a meeting for the following morning. Gwen arranged temporary signatory controls. Tate called someone in the hallway and said, "It's a misunderstanding," 4 times in 5 minutes. My mother sat at the family table with her purse on her lap, staring at the program. At some point, Aunt Lenore came to me. She looked smaller without the force of the meeting holding her upright. "I'm sorry," she said. I knew she meant more than tonight. I know. I should have done more, yes. Her eyes filled. I did not soften the yes. I did not sharpen it either. She nodded. "I brought something," she said. From her purse, she pulled out my grandfather's old letter, the one about stewardship. She had folded it into a clear sleeve. "You should have the original." I took it carefully. For the first time that night, I felt close to crying. "Thank you." Lenore touched my hand once and left. Rosa waited until most people had gone. She did not ask if I was okay. I was grateful for that. Okay was too small a word and too much work. She pointed toward the stage. "You want that folder?" Tate's black leather succession folder still sat on the chair where he had dropped it. "No." "Good," she said. "Ugly folder." I laughed then. A real laugh. Short and unexpected and not entirely happy. Rosa nodded toward the service hallway. "They're breaking down the coffee station. You need food." "I'm fine." "You're not." That was the whole argument. She went out and came back with a banana, 2 packets of peanut butter crackers, and one of the boxed lunches that had been meant for event staff. I ate standing near the back of Ballroom C, while the hotel workers pulled white linens from tables and stacked water glasses into gray racks. No one in my family brought me anything. That detail stayed with me too. Not because I expected them to. By then, expectation had become a smaller thing. But because there was something clarifying about being fed by someone who owed me nothing, while the people who owed me truth stood 20 feet away discussing optics. At 10:08 p.m., my father approached me one last time. The ballroom was mostly empty. The company banner had been taken down and rolled into a cardboard tube. Without it, the stage looked ordinary. Raymond looked ordinary too. Still proud, still angry, but smaller, he said. I waited. He looked toward Gwen, who was speaking with the bank representative near the exit. "Can we speak as father and daughter?" For a second, the old ache rose. There it was. The sentence I had wanted in some form for years. Father and daughter. Not creditor, not problem, not guest. But he had reached for it only after the vote. I thought of the reception desk, the plates, the navy dress, the payroll night, the program. My mother's hand on my sleeve, Tate's smile. The missing chair. I said, "You said I was a guest." Guests leave when the meeting is over. He stared at me. No one applauded, no music swelled. He did not collapse. He just looked at me with the stunned anger of a man who had finally heard his own sentence come back without decoration. Then I walked away. The next morning, I arrived at the plant at 7:12. I had slept maybe 2 hours. The lobby sign was still there, built on family, driven by future. The receptionist looked startled when I came in. "Good morning, Ms. Alder." I signed in out of habit, then stopped. Gwen, who had arrived before me, said from behind the reception desk, "You do not need to sign in as a visitor." The receptionist looked mortified. I smiled slightly. "It's all right." But I did not sign. That mattered. Small things do. My first week as chair was not glamorous. People imagine public reversals as endings. They are not. They are doors opening into rooms full of work. We met with the bank. We notified insurers. We engaged an outside firm for the audit. We froze Tate's company card and found, by lunch on Wednesday, enough questionable charges to justify every instinct I had ever had about him. Golf trips coded as client development. Restaurant bills with no clients attached. A software subscription nobody used. 3 hotel stays near Aaron's apartment in Columbus listed as vendor meetings. I did not post any of it. I did not leak it. I did not call him names. I let the audit proceed. That was worse for him than my anger would have been. Raymond was moved into an advisory role with limited authority during transition. He hated the phrase limited authority. I know because he repeated it back to Gwen like it tasted spoiled. Celia resigned from the governance committee after the misstatement issue became impossible to soften. She sent me a long email 2 days later. Subject, heartbroken. I did not open it right away when I did. It was exactly what I expected. She wrote that she loved me. She wrote that the meeting had been painful for everyone. She wrote that public embarrassment could scar a family for generations. She wrote that my father had always been proud of my intelligence, but did not always know how to show it. She wrote that Tate was devastated and that I should consider the long-term emotional cost of continuing down this road. She did not write, "We lied." She did not write, "You saved payroll." She did not write, "I watched your father call you a guest and let him." I forwarded it to a folder marked personal. No response. That was new for me. Not the folder, the no response. Tate called 12 times in one afternoon after the auditors requested his passwords. I did not answer. He texted, "You're taking this too far, then. Dad is losing it. Then, Mom can't sleep. Then, finally, what do you want from us?" I looked at that last one for a long time. Once, I would have written an answer so careful it hurt. I want you to tell the truth. I want you to remember. I want you to stop making me the cost of your comfort. I want Mom to choose me when it matters. I want Dad to say my name without needing something. I want you to become someone who does not mistake inheritance for worth. I wrote nothing, because by then, I understood something I had avoided for years. Some people ask what you want only after they lose the power to ignore it. I let the question stay unanswered. Rosa moved through those weeks like a quiet general. She kept payroll steady, corrected employee files, found missing benefit notices, and told anyone panicking that wages were protected. She did not praise me in public. She did something better. She behaved as if stability was possible. On my 5th day, I walked into the old chair's office, my father's office. The nameplate had been removed from the door. The walls still held framed photos of handshakes and ribbon cuttings. His leather chair sat behind a desk too large for the room. The air smelled faintly of cologne and old paper. I stood there and felt nothing clear. Not victory, not grief, not peace. Just the strange quiet that comes when a room you feared turns out to be furniture and drywall. On the desk was the chipped green mug. Alder Industrial since 1979. It had been washed. The chip was still there. Inside were 3 pens and a blue sticky note. Figured this one belonged upstairs now. Rosa, I sat down slowly, then I cried. Not loudly, not beautifully, not in a way anyone would put in a movie. I cried with one hand over my mouth, sitting in a chair I had never wanted as much as I had wanted my father to tell the truth. After a few minutes, I wiped my face with a rough brown paper towel from the private bathroom and moved the mug to the right side of the desk, not in the center. I did not want to make it a shrine. I just wanted it where I could see it. The months that followed were not clean. Nothing involving family and business ever is. The audit found enough to remove Tate from his executive role. He was not prosecuted. The board chose recovery, repayment, and separation because the company could not afford a circus. Tate told mutual acquaintances I had always been jealous and had staged a coup. Some believed him. Most did not say either way. My father stopped coming to the plant by winter. Officially, it was for health and transition reasons. Unofficially, he could not bear walking past employees who now knew he had nearly missed payroll, and then erased the person who covered it. My mother continued to send messages on holidays. Beautiful messages, painful messages, messages that sounded like apologies if you read them quickly, and admissions of nothing if you read them carefully. For Christmas, she left a gift on my porch, a cream scarf in a silver box. No note except love, Mom. I stood in the doorway holding it while snow gathered on the porch rail. Then I set it inside my front closet, unopened. Maybe that sounds cold. It did not feel cold. It felt like not stepping into a room where the floor had already given way. Aunt Lenore came to the plant in January with a tin of shortbread and asked if she could see the old break room. We sat at the small table near the vending machines. The green mugs were back on the shelf. Not all of them, just a few. Enough. She told me stories about my grandfather I had never heard. How he once drove 3 hours to apologize to a customer himself. How he kept a list of employees' children's graduations in his top drawer. How he and Raymond had fought when Raymond wanted to replace holiday bonuses with branded jackets during a tight year. Harold said jackets don't pay heating bills, Lenore said. I laughed. Then she looked at me. He saw you, Marin. I looked down at my coffee. I know. And I did. That did not fix what came after him, but it gave one piece of my childhood back. Rosa and I never became sentimental friends in the way people might expect. We did not have long dinners where we talked about trauma. She still asked if I had eaten. I still said yes when I had not. She still saw through it. On the first anniversary of the meeting, she left a packet of peanut butter crackers beside the green mug in my office. I looked at them and smiled. There are people who remember the exact shape of your hunger. At the next annual shareholders meeting, we held it in the plant cafeteria. No hotel ballroom, no white flowers, no succession stage, folding chairs, coffee urns, a projector that needed to be smacked once before it worked. Employees on one side, shareholders on the other, vendors mixed in because nobody stopped them. The report was boring and honest. Revenue was down slightly during transition. Debt was properly listed. Vendor terms had improved. Payroll was current. The audit findings were summarized without theater. Board reforms were adopted. My name appeared where it belonged, not larger than anyone else's, just present. Near the end, during open questions, one of the older machinists raised his hand and asked whether the company picnic was coming back. I looked at Rosa. She looked at the budget sheet, then she shrugged. Potluck, she said. So I said yes, that summer. We held the picnic in the back lot behind the loading bays. Someone brought ribs, someone brought pasta salad, Mr. Haskell's granddaughter ran around with a balloon tied to her wrist. The old green mugs were not used because it was too hot for coffee, but one sat on the check-in table holding raffle tickets. At one point, I saw a little girl, maybe 8, sitting at the reception desk inside the open lobby, spinning slowsy in the chair while her mother talked to someone from accounting. I walked over and said, "That chair squeaks if you turn too fast." She froze. Then I smiled. "So turn slow." She grinned and turned slow. I thought of my grandfather. I thought of myself at 7. I thought of all the ways a place can hurt you and still be worth repairing if you stop, handing the tools to people who keep breaking it. I did not reconcile with my parents. That is the part some people dislike. They want the ending where my father shows up with shaking hands and says he was wrong. They want my mother to finally tell the truth without softening it. They want Tate to understand that being chosen did not make him capable. I understand the wish. I had it longer than anyone, but my real life did not give me that scene. What it gave me was quieter and more useful. It gave me a company with corrected books, employees who got paid, a board that asked real questions, a small office where the mug with the chipped rim held pens, a folder full of documents I no longer had to carry everywhere because the truth had moved from my bag into the record. It gave me Sunday mornings without family group texts making my stomach tighten. It gave me holidays I could plan without waiting to see whether I would be invited as help or as a daughter. It gave me the ability to hear my father's voice in my memory and not obey it. Every now and then, someone asks if I regret making it public. I always answer the same way. I didn't make it public. They did. They chose the ballroom. They chose the program. They chose the microphone. They chose the sentence. I chose not to disappear inside it. That is different. The last time I saw my father in person was not dramatic. It was outside the bank after a transition meeting he had not been invited to but had apparently heard about. He was standing near the entrance in a dark overcoat, looking older than he had the night of the vote. "Marin," he said. I stopped because the sidewalk was public, and because I was no longer afraid of being alone in a conversation with him. Gwen was inside. Rosa was expecting me back. The world had witnesses now, even when they were not standing beside me. He said, "You look well." "Thank you." He glanced toward the bank doors. "Company doing all right?" Yes, a muscle moved in his cheek. Good. For a moment, I thought he might say something real. He looked at me and I saw the struggle, not with love maybe, with pride, with habit, with the terrible difficulty of admitting that the daughter he had minimized had protected something he claimed to love. Then he said, "Your grandfather would be pleased the company stayed in family hands." There it was again, the closest he could get. I nodded once. He'd be pleased it stayed in honest hands. His eyes sharpened, but he did not argue. I walked past him, not because I hated him, because the meeting was over. That evening, I went back to the plant after everyone had left. The winter sky was already dark. The parking lot lights buzzed softly. Inside, the office was quiet, except for the hum of the vending machine and the distant clank of pipes settling in the cold. I stood in the break room and took one of the green mugs from the shelf. Not the chipped one from my office. Another one, faded letters, slight coffee stain near the handle. I washed it in the small sink, dried it with a paper towel, and set it on the table. For a moment, I let myself remember everything at once. My grandfather's peppermint jar, my father's voice saying guest, my mother's hand on my sleeve, Tate's unopened speech, Rose's blue sticky note, Gwen reading the tally, Lenore standing with both hands on her cane, the silence after people finally understood. Then I turned off the break room light and went home. That's my story. A chipped green mug, the word guest, and a name finally printed where it belonged. If someone in your life only values you when you are useful, take this as your sign to stop confusing access with love. Let people show you who they are when you stop rescuing them. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. And if you've ever had to choose your dignity over being included, I hope tonight you remember this. You are allowed to leave the room they only invited you into so they could use you.